Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I'm your host, Marlene, and this is your June garden to-do list. And remember, I'm coming at this from Zone 9, so you may be in a different zone, and your to-do list may be different. Remember, always check out the USDA site, and they will have which zone you are in. So for Zone 9, planting vegetables, pretty much all your summer veggies can still go in if you haven't planted them already. Some of them, like watermelons, melons, you're just starting to plant. So, and a lot of people are like, oh my goodness, is it too late to plant tomatoes? No, actually, it's perfectly fine. I think mid-June was the latest I've planted tomatoes and got a perfectly good harvest. The weather's been a little iffy. In fact, there is a chance of rain tomorrow, which is very bizarre, but I'm actually looking forward to it. So temperatures have been all over the place, a little more cool at night than normal. So that could, yes, be stunting your tomatoes slightly. I've been getting the questions, why are my tomatoes not setting fruit? Remember, the first few flower clusters, if the plant's large enough to set fruit, it won't. If you have problems with pollinators, always shake the plant. If you're growing large varieties or heirlooms, they don't produce as much as some of these hybrids. So always plant a mixture if you can. But yes, you could plant your peppers, your tomatoes, your eggplants, your squash, your watermelons. Pretty much anything goes. You could do successive planting, such as corn. If you haven't planted corn, go ahead and plant. If you've already planted corn, you could plant another round of corn. Speaking of peppers, it's a good idea to shade your peppers. They can get a lot of sunburn, so just put up, 30% shade cloth, anything to prevent that afternoon sun from beating down on the peppers and causing that sun scald. If you have basils and herbs, make sure they're not going to flower. Remember, basil, for the most part, is an annual. When it starts flowering, it wants to go to seed. Energy is taken away, so the taste could be off. Plus, it's going to shorten the lifespan. So basically, just pinch the flowers off. I personally like a lot of my basil to go to flower because it's great for pollinators. The bees just absolutely love it. But of course, if you want to harvest it, it can make the taste a little off. So go ahead and pinch those. Make sure you add mulch. Mulch is so important to smother the weeds and to keep the moisture in. I used a mix of straw and a mix of compost. Compost is great, of course, because it just breaks down into the soil. Hay is relatively cheap and it's nice to spread because you could just break off, I guess they call them flakes, and lay them down. It helps to smother weeds. Put it on thick, 3 to 4 inches. Remember to deep water trees right now. Young trees, gonna deep water them. Mature trees generally don't need water at all because their roots are pretty far out. They're getting water other places, but it's never a bad idea to put a hose on, a very small drip, and just water for several hours. Remember, for young trees, you could form a little berm around and just use like 2 5-gallon buckets and allow it to percolate down. Speaking of trees, if you have young fruit trees, make sure you paint with the 50% white diluted anterior latex paint for sunburn. Once the trees get that sunburn and split, there's no going back. That's open wounds for disease and pests. If you have trees that are staked and you haven't taken the stakes off in a very long time, it's not a bad idea to do that now. Remember, stakes should not be right up against the trunk. They should be about, 8 inches to a foot away on either side. You should do a nice figure 8, one low and one at basically the highest point where the plant wants to flop over. You want the tree to be able to move slightly because that's how it's going to build taper. You don't want to put the stake right up against because 1, it could harm the trunk, and 2, really, it's not going to get, quote, the exercise to develop the taper. Thin your fruit trees. If your fruit trees are putting on a lot of fruit, you can have limb breakage, so you're going to want to thin fruit. I know it's tough to do. A lot of trees will do it on their own, but thin it so the fruit's not touching. You could even shorten the branches off too if they're even heavier, so just cut the branches. You could prop them up as well, but make sure you just protect that area where the wood or the metal is contacting the wood so you don't have wounds right there. But getting a lot of pictures of people with their limbs snapping off. And remember, once a wound happens on a tree, there's nothing you could really do. That the seals and the tapes, they don't do anything. In fact, they can inhibit the healing of a tree. So you don't want to cause a wound that could just lead for long-term problems. Monitor for pests on all your plants, especially your vegetables, because you're going to get them, right? You're going to get pests. Remember, it's a lot of plants can handle a decent amount, but some of them vector diseases. Some of them, if you have them now, they'll just build up in numbers next year. But really, it's if you just have some, just monitor. But kaolin clay is a good preventative. It's a clay that you put on the foliage. You might have noticed it on orchards where the trees all of a sudden have this white coating on them. They use it to prevent various fruit flies going into the fruit. Diatomaceous earth is a good way to treat various insects, but remember, don't get it on the flowers. Put it on the leaves and put it on the ground. Ground-dwelling bugs, any insects, once they go over it, it basically cuts them up. Hose blasts are your best friends. Because you can knock the eggs off, you could knock the adults off, but you have to do it every few days. It's not just a one-trick thing. Of course, soap sprays, but the same thing. It's not just one time. If you haven't caged your tomatoes, do so before they get too out of hand. Big cages. If you've seen pictures of mine, you know that they're big. Do you need to prune your tomatoes? Heck no. Studies have shown, if you listen to my talk with Dawn Shore and Vegetables, the studies have shown that you actually get a bigger yield if you don't prune. If you have so many varieties in little space, then yes, you could train your tomatoes to 1 liter. Or if you just really like pruning and it's therapeutic for you, you could go ahead and do that. Peppers, you probably want to cage them too, because they could actually get pretty big and limbs could break off from the weight of the peppers as well. Be patient with fruit set. As I was mentioning, that sometimes your tomatoes are not setting the first few bunches of flowers. That's okay. The plant is just getting established. This could go with your zucchinis and squash as well. Remember, they are monoecious plants, meaning that there's just one plant with both male and female, but the male and female parts are on different flowers. So sometimes you get a lot of males at first and you won't get a female. The female is very noticeable because it has what looks like a miniature zucchini or squash, the ovary. That needs to be pollinated by multiple pollinators to swell up to a full-size fruit. If you're not getting any fruit, you can take a little paintbrush basically, and in the morning, because the flowers close pretty midday, take the pollen from the male and move it on to the female to pollinate it. But of course, to create a really good garden with a lot of pollinators, just plant diversity. I did a post about companion planting, how a lot of that is myths. But the good thing is the more variety you have, the more flowers you have, the more pollinators, the more beneficials. So you shouldn't have a problem with pollinating. But always take a look. You maybe only have female, you may only have male flowers. Be patient, give it time. It's still slightly early. Fruit set is just coming in right now. And as far as planting other things like your perennials, we're coming into the heat. I would say that usually June 1st is the cutoff of when I plant perennials. Can you plant perennials in other plants? Yes, you can. You just have to be very cautious of the heat. What I find a lot is that a lot of times you'll have top dieback. Because of the heat, the plant's going to sacrifice the top. It's going to establish its roots and grow back. And of course, you're going to want to mulch really thick around that to cool the roots and to keep the moisture in. So yes, you could still plant in June. Is it ideal? No, but of course, that doesn't stop me from going to a nursery, seeing pretty flowers and go, ooh, I need that. It can be done. You just need to keep it moist, not sopping wet. And just be aware you might have some heat stress from up above because the plant's going to go, you know what? I'm stressed. Top's going to die. I'm going to get the roots established and grow. So that's basically your June to-do list. It's hopefully, by the end of June, you're going to have a nice crop of vegetables coming in. Fingers crossed we don't get too much triple heat temperatures, but that's not going to happen. Be nice if we got a little bit of rain, which, yes, that might lead to a little bit of powdery mildew, more so a little bit of rust. Remember, sulfur is your go-to, or just wait until, the heat really comes, because I don't think this weather pattern is going to continue much longer. I wish it did, but that's it. So if you have any questions, remember to email me, marlenetheplantlady@gmail.com. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Marlene the Plant Lady, and follow me on YouTube at Everything Gardening with Marlene. And don't forget to rate and review and give a 5-star, and of course, share with a friend. So until next time, everyone, happy gardening.